The tales of Summerset Isles begin with the Aldmer, the forebears to modern-day Aldmer. Aldmer, the Old Elves. Their earliest record reached the Sundering, when the War of Manifest Metaphors ended with Lorcan's punishment, when the old and wandering Elnafey fought each other. Nirn changed. Most of its landmass has sunken into the abyss, the mythical Aldmeris vanishing beneath the waves, causing its inhabitants to flee. Led by a man named High Lord Torinan, he and his people sought salvation from the destruction in Voyage, hoping to find a new place to call home. And they eventually landed on island they called Oredon. This historical site is well known today. It is called the Nine Pro Landing, and it is not far from First Hold. After gathering their strength, accounting for lives and assessing their supplies, Torinan has declared this land as their new home, full of resources and ripe for conquest. Some of his kin were doubtful and wanted to keep searching for remains of Aldmeris, if any are to be found, especially after witnessing horrors like Gethus or Iliadi roaming the land. Torinan, however, stood defiant before them and using the might of his ancestors vanquished the hostile creatures, and in time they were hunted down into extinction. Confident in their leader, the Aldmer began building a city for themselves, the first of Holds, now known as First Hold. As they spread throughout Oredon, they tamed the red and green forests, establishing more settlements, and slowly they would be too culturally distant from their heritage. The Aldmer arrived from Aldmeris, and their society was that of irrecoverable past, but with time these people became known as ancients, ancestors to Aldmer. To clarify, Aldmer would be those who came from Aldmeris and settled the islands. All other varieties of elf come from them. Ancients would be those who were born in Oredon and have started to drift away from Aldmer traditions and teachings. Many cities of the ancients have fallen into ruin as they expanded. Cracks formed in their society due to religious schisms and contesting for resources. Some of these ruins still stand, a monument to their skills in masonry. Eventually, the Aldmer have colonized Isle of Summerset, constructed their strongholds, tamed the griffins, and enslaved the population of goblins. When the largest island of the archipelago was in their control, they have turned their attention outward, and so a Mer came forward, his name Topol. He volunteered to lead an expedition to explore the world and hopefully find Aldmeris. He and two others set out from First Hold, one sailing northwest, one south, and Topol has taken a course northeast. These directions were not chosen at random. See, the Aldmer believed that Aldmeris lied in one of these specific directions. Instead of using a compass, the Aldmeri sailors used waystones, round crystalline objects attuned to a singular lines of power, causing the sphere to rotate on its axis in an alignment with the line. There are known to be three varieties of the waystones, each pointing into one of the directions mentioned before. Out of the three, only Topol returned. After an exceptionally long journey, he told of his adventures. As directed by his superiors, he set his course northeast. Little did he know, that route led him straight into the Iliad Bay, and so he discovered the mainland Tamriel. He sailed around the High Rock Peninsula, trying to maintain his course. Following the coastline, eventually they found themselves passing through the Sea of Ghosts, next to Skyrim, then Morrowind and Vardenfell. They sailed south when reaching the Telvanni Peninsula, and at this point Topol and his crew must have been on the sea for many months and were exhausted. Instead turning back, Topol chanced it and hoped that if they continue on, they will eventually circle Tamriel and return back home. As you know, they were right in their assumptions. But the way back along Black Marsh was not so straightforward. The swampy regions were hard to navigate, and Topol and his crew had to divert from their course, once even sailing deep into the marshes. There they discovered the Argonians, the lizard people of Black Marsh, primitive and bestial. The crew was wary of them, and they made haste to return to open waters. They pushed on, sailing upon a large bay situated on river's mouth. He and his tired crew ventured along the river's banks northbound. As they made their way up the north, towards the center of the continent, they were followed and scrutinized by the early Khajiit running along the river, keeping watch of the trespassers. One day, they reached the lake, place of beauty and serenity, its lustrous waters lapping on sandy shores of 8 islands on the lake. However, they were not alone. Upon approaching the land, they thought to be greeted by the natives, but the colorful birdmen that dwelled there did not speak to them. It was quickly found out that they simply repeated the words and phrases of the crew. They were not hostile and welcomed the wary sailors with open wings. Topol and his men stayed there for a whole month, resting and regaining their strength. In this time, Topol taught the bird folk the skill of writing, which they were fascinated by. In return, they granted Topol their home as his own, the 8 Isles of Paradise in the middle of a lake. After the month has passed, they returned to the seas back on their journey home, and not long after they made it back to Ordon. His return celebrated the colonization of Tamriel, as many Aldmer would venture out to find settlements. One large group of them, the Direni clan, went north into the Iliac Bay, where they found the Isle of Balfira and took the surrounding lands into their fold, giving rise to the Direni hegemony. And here we come to quite the contradiction. The poem Father of the Niben tells of Topol receiving orders regarding his mission from Crystal Tower. However, we know the Crystal Tower was built in an image of Adamantine Tower, which was discovered much later in the Merethic era. The truth has been lost to the ages, I suppose. For centuries, the Aldmer settlers pushed their frontier of conquest further inland, displacing or enslaving tribes of civilizations native to Tamriel. The cities were fending off for themselves, but the rulers did swear fealty to the crown of Alinor. They did, however, had a large degree of independence and freedom. Over time, the culture of Cyrodiilic Aldmer deviated from the culture of their kin in Summerset. In time, the settlers have constructed their own version of the tower, the White Gold Tower. Their tower was built on the very same islands that were given to Topol by the mysterious birdmen of Cyrodiil. With time, the divide between Alinor and the colonists only grew, and when Cameron dynasty took reign in Valenwood, the city-states declared their independence. From then on, they are known as the Aelids. But before the Aelids turned their backs on their own leaders, there is one event of paramount importance that results in further splintering of the Aldmer race. Generally, the Mer tend to have a Nuig worldview. That is, they perceive Mundus as a prison, a trap set by Lorkhan and sprung by Aedra, to which Aldmer claim descendancy. They do not view Lorkhan in a positive light. To them he is the trickster god, the devil, a villain opposing their heroes, Auriel and Trinimac. But Lorkhan was not disliked by all Etada. Some spirits were propitious to him. One of these spirits was Boethia, a powerful entity of treason, conspiracy and plots. She is believed to have been close to Lorkhan, and seeing the Aldmer wallow in pity over their loss of divinity and their separation from the Etheres, she despised them. But rather than punish them for their weakness, Boethia chose her prophet, a Mer named Veloth. Veloth at this time looked at Aldmer society with disdain, being built on greed, decadence, and ambition. He longed for a place where being just, honest, and true would be rewarded. And so, Boethia sent him visions and dreams of him seeking out similar-minded Mer, and when enough have gathered, Boethia, through Veloth, would guide them to a new place they would call home. And so Veloth began gathering followers, and in time organized an exodus from the Summerset Isle. The rest of the Aldmer were less than pleased with Veloth's heresy of renouncing Aedra in favor of a Daedra, and Trinimac, their god champion, same one who dealt Lorcan's final blow, stepped in. With booming voice and righteous might, Trinimac halted Veloth's migration. Trinimac's own followers have gathered around to bear witness to the Titan's power. Trinimac strode before them all and mocked Veloth for trusting Boethia, and he mocked Lorcan, whom he defeated. But Boethia would not take it silently. She devoured Trinimac, assuming his shape, and admitted his faults and flaws in front of the guarded Mer. She spoke of Lorcan's detriment and bare the injustice done to him. She then released Trinimac, who for the first time tasted shame and defeat. From this confrontation he emerged corrupted and twisted beyond recognition. But as the Aedra changed, so did his followers. Those who venerated Trinimac the most also changed and became the Orsimer, pariahs, and they scattered to the four winds as their hideous lives would not be tolerated by the proud Aldmer. The Velothi people, now unhindered, left Summerset and ventured northeast, where they settled in the land of Morrowind. This is the downfall of the Aldmer. Gradual split between them and the Aelids, the sudden leave of the Rennie clan, departure of Veloth and his faithful, and the exile of the Orsimer marked the end of Aldmer. In their place, those who remained in Summerset started to call themselves Altmer, the High Elves, indicating their cultural superiority to other races. For most part of the history, the Altmer have been a very secluded people. Many of them ventured out into the world seeking fortune, but no outsiders were allowed into their lands. Being occupied by their own internal struggles, they were also raided by the Maormer and threatened by the Slode. Minimizing contact with other kingdoms while being attacked by their neighbors made them resentful towards other races and looked down on them. Therefore, the golden-skinned denizens of the Blessed Isle became known as sophisticated but arrogant, eloquent but resentful, powerful but merciless. It is no surprise that not much of the Altmer history is known. With such mindset, the records of their deeds are known to them only. While there were and are many Altmer that have left Summerset to live elsewhere, very few foreigners were allowed to set foot on the island. The first occurrence of Altmer having prolonged contact with the wider world is their commitment to the All Flags Navy. The Slode have been harassing the Altmer for centuries, and once they even managed to sack the city of Skywatch in 1301st year of the First Era. The beautiful city was razed and countless lives were lost, further fueling the Altmer hate for the Sluggerfolk. Skywatch and its area were in Slode control for 959 years, until they unleashed the Thracian Plague on Tamriel. Being infamous for their fascination with necromancy, the Slode have released infected sea creatures onto the shores of Tamriel, resulting in the death of nearly half of all population. In this moment of grave danger, all races put aside their differences and old feuds, and so the All-Flag Navy was made, led by the King of Anvil, Bendu Olo, and the fleet sought vengeance and destruction on the Slode. In 2260 year of the First Era, the Navy has set course to the heart of Slode power, the Coral Kingdom of Thras. Located in between the Isles of Yokuda and the coast of Hammerfell, its shallow atolls are the spawning pools for the Slode. The brave sailors pushed on, battling the undead horrors summoned by the Slode. Eventually they reached a tall coral tower rising out of the sea. Atop of it was a flickering magical blue light. Committing all their strength and power to toppling that tower, the navy succeeded, but at a terrible price. The coral tower sunk, but as it did, a giant whirlpool appeared which destroyed half of remaining vessels. A Pyrrhic victory indeed. In the aftermath of the plague, all participating nations signed a Concordat of Fraternity, committing all to peace and prosperity throughout Tamriel. For Aldmer, this meant reclaiming Skywatch. They rebuild it, but the ruins of their high-tide keep still stick out of the water, a grim reminder of Sloath's cruelty. For the next 650 years, the Aldmer experienced relative peace, not counting the usual Mormer piracy, Sloath skirmishes and political squabbles. For now, the night grows late, the moons hang low above us. Until next time, traveller, Godspeed.